Hurricane Milton was tearing through Bradenton. Amidst the chaos, a solitary black mechanic, Malcolm Reed, drove his old pickup truck to evacuate a neighbor's family to the hospital. There he made a chilling discovery. The ICU was moments from a complete power failure with 3 critical patients inside. Without a second thought, Malcolm braved the storm again, racing back to retrieve his only generator. He delivered it just in the nick of time, then quietly vanished. What he didn't know was that this courageous act was about to transform his life forever. The sky that day was a foreboding canvas, compelling residents to batten down their hatches and double-check news reports. Dark, swollen clouds hung ominously over Bradenton, Florida, heavy with the promise of destruction. Hurricane Milton wasn't just another weather event. It was the kind whispered about for days in advance, the kind that turned front yards into raging currents and hospitals into emergency shelters. The neighborhood near 14th Street West was already succumbing to rising floodwaters. People rushed past each other, their faces etched with anxiety, cars crammed with hastily packed belongings. Yet amidst this frantic exodus, one house remained still. No boarded windows, no packed bags, just a small weathered garage with a tin sign barely clinging to the wall. Auto repairs. Inside, Malcolm Reed wiped grease from his hands, gazing out through the rain-streaked glass. 40 years old, tall and broad-shouldered, his skin the color of rich coffee, his deep-set eyes held a wisdom beyond his years. A short, gray-flecked beard framed his quiet, serious face. Dressed in a faded mechanic's jumpsuit, Malcolm moved with the assuredness of a man accustomed to repairing what others deemed irreparable cars, machines, even fractured trust. He lived alone. No family photos adorned his walls, only a radio on the counter broadcasting relentless storm warnings. Most residents in this neighborhood barely knew his name. Some would even cross the street to avoid him. More than once, customers had taken one look at his complexion and decided their engine troubles could wait for a proper shop across town. Even now, as neighbors scrambled to escape the encroaching storm, few spared him a glance, and no one bothered to knock on his door to offer help. He was simply the black mechanic down the block. Handy in a crisis, invisible the rest of the time. But Malcolm sought no recognition. He sought the smooth hum of a well-tuned engine. He sought the reliable thrum of the old, loud generator he kept in the corner of his shop. His steadfast companion through countless hurricanes, a source of peace in a town that offered little else. As the wind howled louder through the trees, a sudden rattle at the shop door startled him. Opening it, he found Rachel, a neighbor from 2 houses down, drenched and frantic. Her 2 children huddled behind her, clutching backpacks. She had no car, and emergency shelters had already closed their registration. The nearest storm-safe hospital was miles away in Sarasota, with no means of transport. Malcolm didn't hesitate. He grabbed his keys, instructed Rachel to bundle the kids into his truck, and locked up his garage. Outside, sirens wailed, tree branches cracked, and Hurricane Milton's initial squalls began to lash the town. Inside the truck, the children sat in silent awe, their eyes wide. Rachel whispered a trembling, "Thank you." Malcolm said nothing, just adjusted the brim of his old baseball cap, checked his rearview mirror and pressed the gas. The true force of the storm hadn't hit yet, but deep within him, Malcolm knew this night would demand more than mere survival. The rain was relentless now. No longer scattered drops but heavy, blinding sheets that assaulted Malcolm's windshield sideways. His old Ford pickup groaned, its wipers thrashing in futile resistance as it plowed through the rising water along Manatee Avenue, tires half submerged. Malcolm tightened his grip on the wheel, leaning forward, straining to discern the road ahead. The world was dissolving into a grayscale blur. Streetlights flickered, then died completely. The sky rumbled low, like something vast and menacing crawling just above the clouds, ready to descend. Inside the cab, Rachel struggled to hold back tears. Her youngest, Caleb, perhaps 5 or 6, clutched a stuffed animal to his chest. Beside him, his older, sharper sister, Imani, kept her eyes fixed on the side mirror, watching the world vanish behind them. The air was thick with unspoken dread, not just of the storm, but of all it represented. Poverty, neglect, helplessness when everything fell apart. "Thank you," Rachel whispered again, barely audible. Nobody else would even answer the door. Malcolm nodded, eyes still on the road. He didn't need thanks. He needed the truck to hold. The hospital was at least 30 minutes away in normal conditions. Now, with wind gusts exceeding 70 miles per hour and traffic lights out, it felt like navigating a nightmare without landmarks. He took side roads whenever possible, dodging down trees, shattered glass, and loose street signs spinning like bladed projectiles. Every few minutes he'd glance in the rearview mirror, not at the kids, but at the tarped bed of the truck, ensuring the bungee cord securing his tools hadn't snapped. Deep beneath the tarp, like a hidden ace, lay the generator. He hadn't planned to bring it, habit perhaps or instinct, but it was there, humming softly, a silent promise. They reached a narrow bridge outside of Cortez, leading to the highway. As they began to cross, a solid wall of wind struck them head-on, pushing the truck sideways. Rachel gasped, clutching the dashboard. The children screamed. Malcolm kept his foot steady on the pedal, eyes locked on the fading white line ahead. For a fleeting moment he saw something, a memory perhaps. His wife's face, calm and still in that hospital bed years ago. No power, no machines, no help in time. An unfortunate delay, they had called it. That phrase had carved itself into his chest, a wound that never healed. When they reached the other side, the cab fell into a silence as dense as the storm. Rachel looked at him, her eyes wide with unspoken questions. "You okay?" she asked, trying to read his face. "I'm good," Malcolm replied quietly, then added, "We're going to get there." Ahead, Sarasota Memorial Hospital emerged from the haze like a beacon, its emergency lights faintly glowing through sheets of rain. Ambulances choked the entrance. Volunteers in neon ponchos directed evacuees into makeshift waiting areas. Malcolm pulled to the curb and helped Rachel unbuckle the kids. He walked them to the entrance, shoulders hunched against the wind. A security guard stopped him at the doors. "Just them?" the man asked, not even making eye contact. Malcolm nodded. The guard gestured quickly, ushering Rachel and her children inside. She looked back once, mouthing, "Thank you again." Then she was gone. Malcolm stood there for a moment, unsure whether to wait or drive home. The wind had intensified, sharp and urgent. A nurse hurried past, speaking into a radio, her voice tight. "We've got maybe 30 minutes on backup power. ICU is priority, but that gen's acting up. Someone check the coolant line." That stopped him cold. 30 minutes. He turned slowly toward the hospital wall, listening intently. Another staff member passed, muttering something about patient stabilization, respiratory systems at risk, 3 critical patients upstairs. His gaze drifted to his truck. That generator in his bed wasn't new. It was a Frankenstein of salvaged parts, machines others had discarded. But it worked. It always worked. And if the hospital's backup was failing... Malcolm stepped back toward the curb, catching the security guard's eye again. "Y'all got power issues?" he asked. The man assessed him, hesitant. "Nothing you need to worry about." There it was again, that invisible barrier. Not just of class but of race. The assumption buried just beneath the surface. He wouldn't understand, he couldn't help. "I got a generator in my truck," Malcolm stated flatly. "Strong enough to cover a wing, maybe more. Quiet. Efficient. I built it myself." That made the man blink, finally looking at him fully. "Wait here," he said, then disappeared into the lobby. Minutes crawled by like molasses. The rain persisted. Malcolm considered driving home, but then the nurse returned, breathless, eyes darting between him and the truck. "You said you have a generator?" she asked. "Is it gas? Does it run clean?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Fueled, covered, strapped down and ready." She hesitated, then radioed someone. "How far is your place?" she asked. 5, maybe 6 miles, he said. Her face twisted, conflicted. "It's too far," she muttered. "Not in this storm." But Malcolm was already moving toward the truck. "You'll never make it in time," the guard called after him. Malcolm climbed into the cab, wiped the condensation from the inside of the windshield, and stared out into the storm-ravaged road ahead. He didn't know if he'd make it. He only knew that if he didn't try, 3 people upstairs might not live to see morning. He adjusted his cap, started the engine and drove back into the tempest. The wheels bit into the flooded street as Malcolm pushed the old truck harder than ever before. The wind clawed at the sides like unseen hands, attempting to tear the vehicle from the road, each gust making the steering wheel tremble in his grasp. He leaned forward, squinting through the sheeting rain that struck the windshield like bullets. Wipers thrashed erratically. The world had dissolved into a chaotic blur of fog, water, and noise. But Malcolm pressed on, no time to spare. Somewhere behind him, in a hospital gasping for power, 3 lives hung by the thinnest of threads, and perhaps, just perhaps, he held the knot. Inside the cab, the heater had surrendered to the cold dampness. The chill seeped into his clothes, creeping into his chest and spreading through his bones. But it wasn't just the weather. It was memory. It was the crushing weight of everything this storm evoked. He didn't want to revisit it, yet the moment clung to him. 7 years ago. Another storm. Another night of paralyzing panic. That time it had been his wife, Leah. Asthma had always been a part of her life, but that night, it had worsened rapidly. The roads had flooded just as they were leaving. By the time they reached the hospital, the power had failed. Machines were down. The backup generator hadn't kicked in for another 10 minutes. 10 minutes too long. He'd held her hand in the dark as she slipped away, watching nurses scramble helplessly with manual pumps and flashlights. He remembered the profound silence after her last breath more vividly than the chaos before it. A cold, heavy silence that never truly dissipates. They had called it an unfortunate delay, a phrase he could never forgive. He never blamed the staff, he blamed the system. The one that allowed critical equipment to decay until people died. The one that forgot neighborhoods like his. The one that had buried Leah and then sent him a bill. Now here he was again. A hospital on the brink. A machine that might be the difference. Only this time he wouldn't let silence win. The roads back to his garage were worse than when he left. Water rose high up the tires, swirling like oily rivers. He swerved to avoid debris. Twisted metal signs, pieces of roofing, even a shattered canoe. He knew every crack in these streets, every hidden dip beneath the water, but that offered no guarantee of safety. At one point, a fallen tree completely blocked the lane. With no way around, he slammed the truck into park and climbed out. Rain slapped his face as he wrapped his arms around the soaked branches, dragging and hauling them piece by piece, his boots sinking into the mud with every step. His muscles screamed, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Each ticking second was a second closer to losing someone else. When he reached the garage, the place seemed barely alive. The tin roof flapped violently, a side shutter torn off and dangling by one hinge. He burst through the side door, the wind howling behind him. Everything inside shook, but the generator sat untouched in the corner, wrapped and ready. It was old, pieced together from parts he'd scavenged from junkyards and trade-ins. He'd built it with his hands and his grief in the months following Leah's passing. Some men drowned their pain. Malcolm welded his. With practiced movements, he pulled back the tarp and checked the fuel line. Tank full, oil clean. He gave the cord one pull. The engine roared to life with a satisfying growl. He shut it off quickly, wrapped it tightly in a tarp, then bound it with rope like a precious cargo he couldn't afford to lose. Every knot was a silent promise to her memory. He pushed the heavy frame onto a dolly, wrestling it toward the truck's tailgate. The wind nearly knocked it sideways. One bad slip and he'd be pinned or worse. But he braced, lifted, and muscled it into place. Once secure, he tied it down with everything he had, cords, rope, tension hooks, until the generator was as snug as cargo on a ship's deck. Then he was back behind the wheel, water dripping from his beard, his breath fogging the cab. For a second, his hand hovered over the ignition. Outside, thunder cracked like a final warning. His other hand touched the glove box. Tucked inside, behind registration papers, was a faded photo of Leah, her smile still as bright, as alive as the day he'd taken it. He stared for a moment, then said aloud, "Not this time," and turned the key. The engine roared to life. The truck peeled away from the curb and Malcolm plunged back into the storm. Meanwhile, back at Sarasota Memorial, the ICU flickered precariously. A pair of nurses watched heart monitors, noting the steady voltage drop. One patient was already unconscious, their monitors dim. A young boy stirred weakly in his bed, his lungs struggling. An elderly woman murmured incoherently, her breath catching in short gasps. Power levels at critical, the technician reported, regulators failing within minutes. There was no plan B. Nobody had one. The only hope offered was a man with no badge, no title, and a promise most thought impossible. But Malcolm was coming. The final stretch of road to the hospital was almost impassable. Cars abandoned on sidewalks, a power pole half fallen across 2 lanes. He swerved, tires sliding, engine straining as he made the last turn. The hospital loomed ahead like a glowing phantom, emergency lights bathing the entrance in red. He pulled into the side lot near the utility entrance, leapt from the cab and sprinted to the back. Rain pounded his face, his hands trembling as he unlatched the cords, dragging the dolly down the ramp. A guard spotted him. "What the hell are you doing?" the man yelled, eyes wide. "Generator," Malcolm shouted back. "For the ICU." A nurse appeared seconds later, radio in hand. "He's the one," she said urgently. "Bring it in." He pushed the dolly through the corridor, soaked to the skin, boots squelching. Two hospital engineers met him at the junction box, their eyes skeptical until they saw the machine. "Fueled?" one asked. "Tested," Malcolm replied through clenched teeth. "Built it myself. Won't quit on you." They connected wires, ran conduit, adjusted flow levels. The old hospital generator died just as they hit the switch, and then, light. The ICU brightened in a wave of energy. Machines beeped back to life. Ventilators surged. Oxygen flowed. The little boy stirred. Deborah Warren's eyes fluttered open. Nurses exhaled, techs shouted confirmation. Vitals holding. "All 3 patients are stable." "Malcolm?" He stood in the hallway, soaked, chest heaving, staring through the glass. Somewhere deep inside he felt it. That moment when the silence he had feared, the one that had taken Leah, had been beaten back, if only for a night. He closed his eyes and whispered her name, not out of sadness but peace. In the control room just off the ICU, the air had become thick with tension. Every technician, nurse, and doctor moved quickly but quietly, as if the slightest wrong sound might shatter the fragile grip they held on the lives behind the glass. The old generator's final pulse had ceased a full 60 seconds ago, and now everything rode on the machine. Malcolm had wheeled in with the kind of urgency typically reserved for war zones or emergency rooms teetering on the edge of collapse. The moment the switch was thrown and his generator roared to life, there was no time for applause, not even for relief, just a collective breath, held, then slowly exhaled as lights steadied and monitors blinked back into rhythm. But Malcolm didn't leave. He stood near the doorway, soaked, silent, his eyes fixed on the ICU as if he needed to confirm with his own heart that the storm inside had truly passed. Water dripped from his sleeve cuffs and pooled around his boots, but he remained motionless. The nurses didn't ask him to move. They could sense it. Whatever had brought him here wasn't finished yet. The doctor on call, a wiry man named Hargrove with sharp glasses and sleeves rolled high on his arms, made a final note on his clipboard and stepped into the hall. He glanced at Malcolm, hesitated, then said, "You just bought us a miracle, man." Malcolm nodded, nothing more. "You could?" Hargrove asked, unsure what else to say. Malcolm gave the faintest shrug, his eyes still on the old woman in the bed, her chest now rising and falling with regularity, the pallor gone, color returning to her face. After a long minute he turned and walked back through the corridor, his boots leaving a trail of muddy water that no one cleaned up right away. Outside, the storm still screamed, but its intensity had shifted. Less rage, more exhaustion, as if even Hurricane Milton was finally tiring. The parking lot was half underwater now, the truck sitting where he'd left it, battered and adorned with palm fronds. He climbed into the cab, hands aching, chest tight. For the first time all night he sat still. The rain hit the roof in a steady rhythm, and in that small silence, something within him began to ease. Inside, the power crew was still checking connections, but the ICU had stabilized. Nurses now spoke in normal voices again. The boy had opened his eyes and asked for his mom. One of the aides was already calling her. Another nurse sat beside Mrs. Warren, adjusting her blankets, unaware that the man who had made her breath possible again had just walked back into the dark. On the drive back, Malcolm didn't go home, not yet. He drove aimlessly through the soaked streets of Sarasota, past darkened homes, silent streetlights, stores with shattered windows and signs twisted backward by the wind. He passed a police cruiser stalled in an intersection, its lights flashing uselessly against the rain. He passed a man pulling his dog through thigh-high water, both of them too tired to run. This wasn't just about one hospital, it never was. It was about a city surviving on the edge. He thought of all the people who never even got the chance to make a difference because no one had ever given them the tools or the trust. His truck groaned as it rolled back toward Bradenton. The storm's fury was finally abating, but the damage it left behind was clear. His neighborhood was half dark, half flooded. Trash cans floated past porches. Trees were down across fences. Somewhere in the distance, a baby cried. He pulled into his driveway slowly, headlights casting long shadows across the cracked garage. He sat behind the wheel for a moment longer, then killed the engine. Inside the shop, everything was still damp from earlier. Tools had been scattered by the wind. A wrench clinked underfoot as he stepped inside. He looked around the dim room. The place smelled of oil and storm water. He walked to the back corner and found Leah's photo again, still tucked behind a worn license plate nailed to the wall. He stared at her smile, feeling everything and nothing all at once. He thought of her that night and what she would have said if she'd seen what he did tonight. She would have told him he did the right thing, that he finally saved someone even if it wasn't her. A crack of thunder broke outside, far off now. The storm was nearly gone, but something had shifted, not just in the air, not just in the hospital, but in Malcolm. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a shadow in his own city. He had walked into the storm, brought back light, and left without a name. The next morning, as the town assessed fallen trees and tallied damage, someone at the hospital began asking about the man with the generator. A nurse swore he didn't give his name. A technician thought he might have been a mechanic. A doctor wondered if he had been military given his bearing. But no one could say for sure. No one took a photo. He was just a face in the storm, a figure in the rain. Malcolm never said a word. He returned to his shop, fixed the door, cleaned his tools, and checked the straps on his truck as if nothing had happened. But he knew. He knew what 30 minutes meant. He knew what silence sounded like when machines stopped. And this time he'd beaten it. He'd given someone else the time Leah never got. The generator stayed in the truck bed for 2 more days before he finally brought it back inside. Still clean, still warm to the touch, still humming faintly as if it knew it had done something good, as if it remembered too. It began with a headline, just a single line in the Bradenton Herald, tucked near the bottom of the second page. Local mechanic delivers generator through storm, saves ICU during Hurricane Milton. There was no photo, just a name, Malcolm Reed, and a few lines about a man who braved gale force winds to bring power to a hospital on the brink of failure. But the story spread rapidly. By that afternoon, it had made its way to Sarasota's regional news. By the next morning it was on local radio, then the evening broadcast, then picked up by national blogs, hungry for hope amidst stories of destruction and loss. People needed someone to believe in after the storm, and here he was. The reports were always consistent. A mechanic from Bradenton, mid-40s, brought his own generator to a failing hospital when backup power gave out, arriving with only minutes to spare, then leaving without giving his name. No interviews, no reward, just disappearing into the storm like a ghost with grit. At first, Malcolm didn't notice the attention. He was too busy restoring his shop, fixing cracked siding, hammering the dented garage door back into place, draining water from tool cabinets. When neighbors passed, their nods lingered a little longer than usual. A few even stopped to ask if he was the man in the story. He shrugged and said nothing, not out of rudeness, but because it didn't feel like something that needed explanation. He had done what needed to be done. That was enough. But then on the third day, a sleek black SUV rolled slowly up the gravel drive of Reed Auto Repairs. It didn't belong in this part of town. The vehicle was spotless, the kind that usually only stopped if someone was lost or avoiding traffic. Malcolm watched from the doorway, rag in hand, sleeves rolled to his elbows, sweat on his brow from pulling an engine most of the morning. The door opened. A woman stepped out. She moved with the confident bearing of someone who belonged in places with glass walls and boardrooms, tall, poised, dressed in a sharp navy pantsuit that somehow remained composed despite the Florida heat. Her heels clicked across the cracked pavement until she reached the edge of the bay where Malcolm stood. She didn't offer a smile, she offered her hand. "Mr. Reed," she said, "my name is Angela Warren. I believe you saved my mother's life." Angela took a breath and surveyed the shop, the rusted signage, the patched roof, the uneven floor. "I know this place matters to you," she said, "and I know you didn't ask for thanks, but I don't believe in debts going unpaid." She turned slightly, motioned toward the SUV, and the rear doors opened. A man stepped out carrying a rolled-up set of architectural plans. Another followed with a tablet. Malcolm blinked slowly, comprehending what was unfolding. Angela continued, "I run a tech firm in Tampa. We specialize in emergency systems, but what you did, without any equipment, without any support, was more than we've ever done with 10 times the resources. You deserve more than headlines. You deserve the tools to keep doing what you do best. He didn't answer immediately, just stood there looking at the blueprints now spread across the hood of his own truck. Designs for a new garage. Solar-powered backup systems, stormproofing, a customer lobby, a complete upgrade from the patched-together shop he'd worked in for over a decade. It was overwhelming in its precision, and it was real. Angela didn't pressure him. She simply said, "This isn't charity. This is respect." The renovation began quietly. Crews arrived early each morning, respectful and efficient. They worked around Malcolm's hours, never interfering with his repairs. The old sign came down one Thursday, the new one going up in its place. Reed Motors. Built to last. It was clean and bold, the letters etched in steel, catching the sunlight like a badge of honor. People started showing up not just for car work but to see him. One man brought a flat tire just to say thank you. A woman from the neighborhood asked if he could fix her old washing machine, "Since you clearly fix everything." Local schools invited him to speak. He turned most of them down, but the high school across the street caught him on a good day. He gave a short talk to a class full of teenagers who'd only known his name from YouTube clips and local news. "I just did what I could," he told them. "Didn't wait for permission. Don't need to be a hero to be helpful. Just need to move." Then came the ceremony. Angela returned, this time with a city council member and a reporter from Channel 4 News. They held a ribbon cutting in front of the new garage. A small crowd gathered. Customers, neighbors, even a few hospital staff who'd come to thank him in person. Rachel was there with her 2 kids. Her son wore a cape someone had fashioned from a trash bag and duct tape. Her daughter held a cardboard sign that read, "He saved us too." Angela gave a speech. It was brief, heartfelt. In the midst of the worst storm this region has seen in years, one man decided that other people's lives were more important than his own comfort, his own safety, even his own livelihood. He reminded us that leadership doesn't always wear a title. Sometimes it wears a jumpsuit. They asked Malcolm if he wanted to say anything. For a moment he just stared at the mic. Then slowly he stepped forward, hands in his pockets, voice low but steady. "I didn't expect any of this," he said. "Didn't do it for all this. Just knew I had the right tool and it needed to be somewhere else. That's what fixing things is, right? You take what you got and you make it work." There was a long pause. Not silence, just that kind of stillness that means everyone is actually listening. Then the applause came, not wild, not showy, just deep, honest and full, the kind that meant something. That night, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the lights came on at Reed Motors for the first time, with new wiring and power lines that wouldn't fail in a storm, Malcolm sat on the stoop out front, watching the street. The photo of Leah still rested in his glove box, unchanged, untouched. He didn't need to take it out tonight. He could feel her in the quiet, in the steady hum of the new generator behind the wall, in the way the wind passed without fear through the trees. He hadn't gone looking for recognition but justice, maybe the quiet kind, the kind that comes when people finally see you as you are, had found him anyway. And in a world where storms were always on the horizon, that was more than enough. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.